We are facing an entirely different budget picture than what we've had in Oklahoma for the last 2 or 3 years. The revenues have declined considerably, and we're looking at the probable necessity of rewriting the current year's budget in order to meet the revenues that come in.
So I think the biggest problem, as far as I'm concerned, is the staffing.
Neighbors who have a concern, I want to treat them on 8th Street the same as I treat the people on 24th Street.
Well, I began to sing professionally in 1961, with almost 12 years ago, and was always very difficult, but very pleasant because I am doing what I want. And I don't care, for example, if yesterday I traveled for 15 hours and today for 10 hours, and I am here very fresh because I am doing what I want.
I've talked with not only Speaker Draper but other members of the legislature about whether or not the department will continue to need as many juvenile centers as we now have, but there's absolutely been no definite plan made to close any center or any number of centers. We're in the process now of implementing what's generally called the McCorkle bill. It was passed last session. Until we know how many of the present residents of the juvenile centers can be housed in the community-based facilities, we won't know how many facilities we need, so it's highly premature at this time to speculate about closing of those schools.
Their stories are different. The one thing they all have in common is that they've been thrown out of work, and they've come to Oklahoma looking for a new beginning.
I was going to put my kids in an orphanage, and I didn't know where I was going to go. I just didn't care, because after that there was no point to my living. I don't know where I would have went. And suicide did cross my mind. It's the only time I've ever thought of suicide. But it was very, very much a consideration I was having then.
Abandoned by her unemployed husband, living with her 2 baby boys in a car for 3 weeks, Rose Casares seriously considered resigning permanently from the new poor. An old car quietly cruises down a residential street. The jalopy's driver doesn't want to attract a lot of attention. He wants to find just the right spot to spend the night, a place where the police won't hassle him and his wife for sleeping in their car.
And warn them, says there's not the jobs there.
Harold Beasley and his wife Barbara have moved to Oklahoma City from Indiana. Harold was a barber in Terre Haute, but with nearly a fourth of that town's workforce unemployed, not many people could afford to have their hair cut. So, like thousands of other idled workers, Harold and Barbara came to Oklahoma looking for the jobs they thought would be plentiful.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of people moving from from Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan. They're all moving down south because they think there's more jobs.
Yeah.
And there's no problem with getting jobs. Even if you have the money to pay your rent and everything, a lot of times they come down here and lose everything they got, lose their cars because they have to sell it because they can't live.
Yep.
Just because there isn't work down here they think there is.
The Beasleys and other newcomers often end up at the city rescue mission. The mission offers hot food and shelter to the homeless. Joe and Donna Rice sought refuge for their family at the mission after living in their car for 1/4 of a year. Joe had been a construction contractor in Indiana. In Oklahoma, he was unemployed.
We lost everything we had back in Indiana. We had to sell. And then we get out here and we sleep in a car. We see our kids hungry. And we see our kids that they can't even get out of the car. And it hurts. It really does. You sleep in a car for 3 months and you try to put your kids in school. It gets to you after a while, it really does.
Joe has given up trying to find a construction job. Instead, he's studying social work at the mission. Harold Beasley has found a job as a day laborer making minimum wage. He'll continue to sleep in his car until he can afford a place to stay. People like the Beasleys and the Rices don't want a handout. They don't want your pity. They just want a decent job and a chance to graduate from that new class of Oklahomans known as the New Poor.
Indicated by Monsanto is quite valuable, and the release of that could cost them. 4 supervisors that are also work. We have turned over to other information as indicated by Monsanto is quite valuable, and the release of that could cost them, I'm sure, a considerable amount by not having the benefit of this process and this chemical that they were using, this additive. It's the first one we've had in quite a while in this area, so it's a little unusual here in this area, and we're glad this case came out like it did.
To build a stagecoach takes a special talent these days. Only there are not many people in the market for a good carriage or stagecoach. Specialty businesses like this one are being hard hit by a poor economy. The workers at Frizzell's Stagecoach Company in Oklahoma City have spent much of their lives mastering this art from the past. But stagecoach builders are very limited when it comes to finding jobs. Frizzell's once employed 20 people. Today, all but 5 have been let go. It still takes about 3,000 hours to build a stagecoach, and much longer before a buyer is found.
you wonder from day to day and week to week whether you're going to be eating. You know, it seems like the good Lord always looks after us, and we do. But believe me, you can't there's no trend. You can't put your finger on it. You can't project from one year to the next.
In 1909, when Oklahomans were still celebrating their newfound statehood, workmen were putting the finishing touches on the Pushmataha County Jail. The Push County Jail hasn't changed much in the past 74 years, except maybe it's gotten a little bit worse. State inspectors have found numerous health and safety code violations each time they've examined this jail. The roof leaks every time it rains, and it rains.
Your number, please. Southwestern Bell telephone operators have a big job answering thousands of different calls. But sometimes there's someone dishonest on the other end, trying to swindle a free long-distance call for himself while charging it to another number. Oftentimes it's done from a phone booth. Telephone operators have been told to be cautious when placing a third number call.
Okay, sir, can I have your name? What's your last name? Okay, Rick, I have to put you on hold to verify this calling.
Officials at Southwestern Bell have noticed an increase in the fraudulent calls over the last few years. They don't know whether the economy is to blame, but they do know who will end up paying for it.
I think there is a perception on the part of some people that it's really not dishonest if you can beat the system, and if you can beat a big company, you really haven't hurt anybody. That is a cost of doing business, and the ratepayers wind up paying the bill for it.
This past year, Southwestern Bell experienced $750,000 worth of fraudulent calls in Oklahoma. Stiffer phoning procedures may be implemented as a result. Customers are urged, however, to contact Bell's business office if they have a problem with fraudulent phone calls, because those calls can then be carefully screened. Bellishaw, Action 4 at Southwestern Bell.
There are 14,000 employees here. That certainly
Henry Bellmon has been director of the Department of Human Services for a couple of weeks. For the last 3 months, he's reviewed the programs, policies, organizational structure, and management approaches of the department. His findings were released today. Bellmon concludes the citizens of Oklahoma have been well served by the DHS. The previous director, Lloyd Rader, is commended for leading the department to excellence. Bellmon says the department is not too big to be effectively managed. He recommends the DHS continue to be financed by the 2% state sales tax. The report states the department's goal is to follow the legislative mandate and deinstitutionalize so people can be helped in family and community settings. Bellmon wants certain programs and responsibilities, such as the donated food commodities program and the licensing of daycare providers, transferred out of DHS. And one state school will be closed.
But we do not have any plans at this time to close either Taft or Boley. Now, with Whittaker, it's a different situation. If Whittaker is depopulated, then obviously we can't afford to keep 230 state employees there with nothing to do. So when we have completed the process at Whittaker, it'll be declared surplus, and
hopefully another mission can be found for that facility, but it'll have to be with an agency other than the Department of Human Services.
Earlier in the day, Bellmon had appeared before the Senate Human Resources Committee. The former senator heard some tough words.
I hope that out of this meeting today, Senator Bellmon, you can give us some general information as where we are as to whether or not we can expect to receive a budget from the department, how much legislative oversight we expect, whether or not there is any problems with free and open communication between the legislature and the Department of Human Services.
Stipe and other senators didn't like finding out about the closing of Whittaker from the press. Next time, they expect to be informed first. Bill Ross, Action 4 at the state capitol.
Oh, I certainly don't think it's a liberal step because it's based, as our congregation understands and interprets the Bible, entirely on the New Testament. This is not an action that disregards the teachings of the Bible. It is an action that interprets the teaching of the Bible, and though many will differ with that interpretation, nevertheless, the action we take, we believe, can be firmly defended by the clear teaching of the New Testament. I hardly see how that could be thought liberal.
At this point, I'm not convinced. I don't feel that any indication from the other board members that there's any real warrant to look at reduction in personnel or cut in salaries. Although on down the road, we can't be assured of that.
The media has reported there are those in the Moore school system who believe our current financial problems are due to mismanagement of funds. I think this is a result of our providing programs above and beyond state and federal requirements. I will tell you, if there's any booing, if there is any more applauding out of place, if there's any jeering, I will personally get up and walk out. I don't have to handle it.
Could our problems be due to any of the following items that we've failed to mention to the public? Almost $300,000 spent on attorney's fees. This is about the same amount we've been cut to the state. Over $100,000 spent with ventures with no contracts. Extensive administrative travel expenses, especially for unneeded out-of-state recruiting, a large increase of personnel in the administration building, at least $500,000 in new positions created during this school year. Could mismanagement or poor judgment be a bigger problem than state cuts? In new positions created during this school year. Could mismanagement or poor judgment be a bigger problem than state cuts?
Oklahoma Natural Gas buys its fuel from in-state producers. In order to ensure a long-term supply, ONG must sign long-term contracts to buy a set amount of gas each year. The so-called take-or-pay contracts require purchasers like ONG to pay for that gas whether it's used or not. The current recession and high prices have reduced the demand for ONG's fuel. Therefore, the company must pay for a big chunk of gas its customers didn't need this past year, $100 million worth.
Does this provision mean your customers are going to lose $100 million?
In the take-or-pay contract, we take so much, or we're required by the contract to take so much, and if we do not take it, we have to pay for it anyway. Now, what we did not take, we can eventually take sometime during the life of the contract, which may be any time between now and the next 25 years. Now, where we end up losing on this type of situation is later on that price of natural gas may be higher, but we will not be losing the $100 million.
Several factors could reduce the amount ONG must pay for its take-or-pay contracts. A spell of cold weather like we're having today, for example, would help the company sell off some of its natural gas. And of course, the biggest help would be for the country to pull out of the current recession. Scott Wallace, Action 4, downtown Oklahoma City.
People need help out there, and we just don't have enough resources right now to help them. People in need keep increasing every day. Funds go down. There's a lot of people out there that sincerely need help. They're not people that just run around handing out welfare. They actually need help. A lot of areas around the state where people are very poor and they're very hungry. And while Tulsa and Oklahoma City may be in better shape, state-wise, Oklahoma has poverty just like the rest of the nation.
It asks for some sacrifice by all, the self-employed, beneficiaries, workers, government employees, and the better off among the retired. But it imposes an undue burden on none. And in supporting it, we keep an important pledge to the American people. The integrity of the Social Security system will be preserved, and no one's payments will be reduced. The Commission's plan will do the job. Indeed, it must do the job. We owe it to today's older Americans and today's younger workers.
Dorothy Gibson is like a lot of us. She buys now and pays later.
Is this going to be cash or charge? Charge.
Credit card purchases have become as American as apple pie. But so has credit card fraud. Last year, credit card crime cost banks $128 million. A recent study showed bankers fear credit card fraud more than armed robbery or embezzlement. The fraud can occur in several ways. The most obvious is the use of stolen cards to purchase items. But counterfeit cards have also become a major problem. In 1982, the banks lost $40 million to counterfeiters.
Credit card fraud doesn't require stealing numbers or manufacturing fake cards. Thank you. Credit card owners are routinely separated from their cards in restaurants and gasoline stations.
While out of sight, it's possible for employees to make two slips. The real one for the customer to sign, and one with a made-up charge. The second slip is turned in with a forged signature. This is one form of merchant fraud. Banks have become familiar with more elaborate systems.
Merchant is in collusion with the individual stealing and supplying the credit card or the credit card numbers. Merchant's able to deposit the sales tickets from those transactions, and it's just like cash.
Bankers blame the recession for the rise in fraud, but financial institutions aren't the only losers. The cost of fraud is passed on to cardholders. It's part of the reason interest rates on credit cards is currently running from 18 to 21%. And unfortunately for both the banks and consumers, the problem is expected to get worse. Bill Ross, Action 4.
It's reasonable in light of the monies as they're now projected. Obviously, I'd prefer not to have a budget cut during the middle of a year when we already have these plans laid. But 3 to 6%, it appears, are the figures that are being bandied about, and 4% is close to the lower end of that. So I would say that on that basis it is.
I just didn't want to. It was God knows how many tens of thousands of.
Our main purpose is not to point up negativism, but to point up ways in which we can further the experience of all Oklahomans and a better understanding of the contributions of blacks, whether it's in military or in medicine or the economy or whatever, just to turn back the pages of civilization and look at what the contributions are.
Technical problems as well as the basic at that time that we have information at the time. I won't say that we would be. I'd say that there would be a possibility. We just want to make sure that we encourage them to manage as well as possible. If you start out now and say that anybody who has problems we will keep open, then you would be encouraging poor management.